Hi there, this is Terry from Stamping Magic. Welcome back to my channel. Today's project is a 6-inch square birthday card. I used the lovely new honeybee stamp set together with some of the golden honey designer series paper. The paper is one of the free items that you can select with a qualifying purchase during our celebration promotion. Now my card today is a spinner card. There's a wheel on the right hand side, and when you turn it, all the bees spin around the hive. It's super fun. As this is a bit of a special card, I've created a coordinating box for it to sit in. Now if you're interested in creating this box, I'll leave a link to an existing video at the top of the screen. Today I'm just going to make the card. So let's get started. These are all the measurements you need for all the elements required to create this project. So if you are interested in reproducing it, you can take a screenshot and refer to it later. My card measures 6 inches square. So to create the card base, ideally you would use a piece of 12-inch by 6-inch cardstock. Now I haven't got any black cardstock in 12 by 12. So to create my card base, I've cut 2 pieces of black card. The smaller piece measures 6 by 6, that will be the back panel, and the larger piece measures 6.5 inches by 6 inches. And I've scored it on the long side at 6 inches, so I've got a 1/2 inch tab on one end. Now I will join these two together later on to create my card base, but just to show you on my sample card, there's nowhere on the card where you can see the join, so don't worry if you have to join 2 pieces together to create your card base. And inside, that 1/2 inch tab is covered by the white panel where you write your message, so no one's going to see the join. I'm going to start by prepping my front panel with my embossing buddy. Now if you're using 12-inch by 6-inch card as your card base, just decide which side you want as your front panel and prep that. Now I'm going to keep that 1/2 inch tab clean, so I've just covered it with some copy paper. I'm going to stamp using my Delicata Golden Glitz ink, but if you haven't got this, just use normal Versamark. This is the honeybee stamp set, and I'm using all of the images today as well as the celebrate sentiment. To stamp the front panel, I'm going to use the 2 flowers, and I'm going to stamp just around the edges because that's the only area that will show. So I've placed my stamps together on an acrylic block, and I'm just going to stamp around the edge. Now the Delicata ink dries quite quickly, so I'm not going to do the whole panel and then cover it with embossing powder. I'll do this in stages, and I'll be using gold embossing powder for this. I can then melt the powder with my heat tool. And this is how it will look once it's finished. Now I'm going to join the 2 pieces together, but before I do, I just want to notch either end of that 1/2 inch tab. Then I can fold and burnish on that score line. and then add glue and join the other piece to it. You just want to make sure the edges are lined up. I've already completed the panel that I'm going to put inside the card. Now, two of the corners I've stamped and heat embossed using one of the flowers from the stamp set. The sentiment comes from the Happy Birthday to You stamp set, which is another of our freebie celebration offerings this year. Now, I stamped this in black ink and I heat embossed it with clear powder. Now, this panel can be added to the inside of the card, and that will cover most of that 1/2 inch tab on the inside, so it won't be noticed. And that's the card base complete. I've gone ahead and cut 2 extra large scallop circles, a smaller scallop circle, and then a piece of designer series paper that's going to layer on top of that smaller one. Now, my extra large scallop circles measure 12.25 centimeters across, which is 4 3/4 inches, and these will be used for the wheel. You could go bigger in size for the wheel, as much as 5 1/4 inches I think will be fine. The reason being that my wheel is recessed over 1/2 inch back from the edge of the card, so there's plenty of room there to adjust the measurements depending on what you have available. Now, also, it doesn't have to be a scalloped circle, it could be a plain circle. Because I've raised up the elements, you've got room to put your finger in there and turn the wheel, whether it's a smooth wheel or a scallop wheel. The other scallop circle is for the center of the card. That's actually what's going to spin, that the bees will be stuck onto. Now, I've changed this from my original card slightly, in that now we're going to have a black edge showing behind the designer series paper. I think it'll look much better like that. Now, to create my extra large scallop, I had to use a retired product, and this is from the Circle collection framelit dies. Now, if you haven't got an extra large circular die that you can use, there are other alternatives. If you've got a circle cutter, you could cut one with that, or you could just draw around something suitable and then cut it out. The smaller scallop circle and the plain circle both come from the Layering Circle framelit dies, which is a current set that we have. And I use the largest scallop circle for the black card and the largest plain circle for the designer series paper. Before I layer the paper onto the smaller scalloped circle, I'm going to paint the flowers. Now, I'm using the Delicata Golden Glitz ink refill, and you just want a tiny drop. This ink goes a very long way. Then I'm mixing it using some water from my aqua painter, and then I can just paint it over the flowers. And you could omit this stage completely. If you haven't got the ink, don't worry about it. I didn't paint the flowers on my original card, and that looks fine. And if you've got the ink pad but not the refill, all you need to do is press the pad onto an acrylic block to transfer some of the ink, and then pick that up with your aqua painter to colour with. Once the ink's dry, you can layer the designer series paper onto the smaller of the scalloped circles. And then the 2 extra large scallop circles need to be glued together back to back. And I've done this just to add strength to that wheel. Next, you want to mark the centre of each of these scallop circles with a pencil cross. Now I've just centred my scallop circle on my grid paper, and then I can just draw a cross in the centre. And then you want to do exactly the same thing for the smaller one. Don't draw the lines all the way across the circle because they're going to be difficult to rub out and they'll show on this top layer. I'm going to use the smallest plain die from the Layering Circles set and cut a circle from the centre of each of these scallop circles. So I'm using the lines to position my die, and you want to be as accurate as possible with this. Don't forget to erase your pencil lines, especially on the smaller scallop circle, because they may show. You would have seen from the measurement screen at the start of this video that you need 3 square mats for this card. One of Designer Series paper, and this can be layered onto the gold foil mat, and then also a black square, which is going to be your back mat, which will be hidden under the mechanism. For both of these panels, you want to mark the centre with a cross, just like you did with the scallop circles. Now, for the black mat, you can mark the cross all the way along, edge to edge if you want, because this mat will not show at all. But make sure you do the other one, the gold with the Designer Series paper, just in the centre. So I'm just marking the edges at the halfway point, and then I'll use my ruler to just mark that cross in the middle. Then I'm going to use my 1.5 inch circle punch to punch out a half circle from the right hand edge on each of these panels. Now if you haven't got a 1.5 inch circle punch, just use one of the circle dies from the Layering Circles set. It doesn't have to be 1.5 inches. I've gone ahead and cut 5 rings from black cardstock, and I've used my Layering Circle dies again to do this. I used the smallest one, which is the one I used to cut the hole in the large scallop circle, and I used the 3rd size up from the smallest. Now I just taped these together using washi tape and then ran them through my die cutting machine to create the 5 circles. Now these all need to be stacked on top of each other. This stack of rings then needs to be positioned on top of your scallop circle. So you want to line up the inner ring of the stack of rings with the hole in the scallop circle. Now I used wet glue, so I would just want to ensure that there's no stickiness left around that ring at all. So I'm just using my embossing buddy to remove it. Now then, we reach the tricky bit. The wheel will be positioned onto the back panel, and we want to find something to glue to the back panel that the wheel can spin around, but it needs to be of optimum size. And what I mean by that is it needs to be just a tiny bit smaller than the hole in the wheel. Now the hole I've die cut measures 1 1/8 of an inch, which is 2.8 centimeters. So I needed to find something just under that size for my wheel to spin around, and that wasn't easy. Now eventually I found a pack of retired buttons, and these are the Designer Silver Basic ones. And the largest button in this set was almost perfect for this project. Now it measures 1 1/16 of an inch, which is 2.65 millimeters. So it's just 1/16 of an inch less than the size of the circle that we die cut out. So there's not a lot of give. Now for my test card, which I'll show you in a minute, I used a 2p piece, and this just measures 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters, and it was much too small. This is my mock-up, my sort of trial run, and you can see when you spin the wheel it pushes the smaller scallop circle off center because there's too much give. Okay, and that's the reason why you want just something that is a tiny bit smaller. And it can be anything. It could be a stack of circle die cuts, it can be a button, a coin, or anything else that is circular in shape. It's just got to be the right size. Once you've found your perfect circular item of the right size, you just want to glue it to the center of this back panel. And I'm using Tombow adhesive, which works fine even though this is a metal button. You just need to give it a few minutes time to dry. While that's drying, you want to cut another circle from the center of your front panel. And for this I'm using another of the layering circle dies, and this is the 4th size up from the smallest. So we use the 1st size to create the hole in the scallop circle, the 1st and the 3rd to create the rings, and we want a bigger circle to create this hole. Again, don't forget to erase your pencil lines just in case they show. And now I can start assembling this card. So you have your back panel underneath with the button or whatever you've used. Your scalloped circle wheel goes next with the rings uppermost, and then your front panel, and then you're going to put your smaller scallop circle on top. I've started by positioning my wheel over the button, and then I'm going to add dimensionals to each of the corners. Now I'm going to make sure I keep these right away from the wheel because you don't want the wheel catching on them. And don't be stingy with them, you want that front panel to be well supported. You can then remove the backs from all the dimensionals and you can lay your front panel on top. Make sure you center that hole around the stack of rings so you've got an equal border all the way round. Now on mine I had a tiny piece of the back panel showing where I notched that part circle out of the card, so I've just snipped that away. I've already completed all the stamping for this project. If I'd have left it in the video would have been far too long. Now just to run through quickly what I've done, I've stamped each of the flowers twice and heat embossed them with gold powder. For my sentiment, I stamped it in black and heat embossed it with clear powder. The hive is stamped in soft suede ink and then heat embossed with clear powder. All the bees were stamped in black ink and then heat embossed with clear powder. Then these were coloured using the Stamping Blend Daffodil Delight markers. I'll be using the detailed bee dies to cut all of these out. The sentiment I hand cut out, I just wanted to celebrate on this one. And I've already added dimensionals onto the reverse of that one. And also the reverse of the larger bee, and I've added a double layer here, just to the wings. I've laid out the bees where I want them to be on that smaller scallop circle. And when I cut these, I also cut 6 blank bees. I'm going to use these to add strength to my coloured bees. I can now glue each of these onto that scallop circle. And I'm just adding a tiny bit of glue to one of the wings. I'm going to have my bees facing all the same way. Now I can flip my circle over and I can glue the blank bees to the back of the coloured ones. And these can't go back to back. The two halves of the bee's body are not symmetrical, so you have to glue the front side to the back of the coloured bees, if that makes sense. Next, I'm gluing the 4 flowers to the corners of my front panel. I'm going to attach this panel to my card base now, and to do that I'm going to use some black foam tape. Now if you haven't got black foam tape, it doesn't matter, just use normal dimensionals or black dimensionals, but use lots of them. You want this panel to be well supported. You can then remove the backing paper from the foam tape or dimensionals and then position your panel onto the front of your card base. To attach the smaller scallop circle to your card, you just want to add glue to the top of that stack of rings. And then you can position your scallop circle on top. I'm going to use some dimensionals to attach the hive to the card, and you want to add these on top of the button or whatever you've used. And I'm going to add a double layer. Just make sure that the edges of the dimensionals aren't touching that inner circle at all. And then you can position your beehive centrally over that smaller scallop circle. I can now remove the backings from the dimensionals on the bee's wings. And for the body, I'm going to use some glue dots. This way, when I add it to the hive, the bee will be a lovely dimensional shape. The body will be flat, but the wings will be raised up. And finally, I can remove the backings from the dimensionals on the sentiment and add that to my card. And that's it, we're all finished. It's quite an over-the-top card really, but it was certainly fun to make. And here's another look at my original card. Now I much prefer the new one. I think changing up that small scallop circle panel in the centre has made a lot of difference. It stands out much better. And then here's another look at my box, and don't forget, if you're interested in this, there's a link at the top of the screen to a video showing you how to make it. And of course I created a second one for my new card, and it's exactly the same as the previous one. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Bye for now.